We would rather learn from fictional stories than make the mistakes ourselves. This week we continue to explore the questions the movie The Ice Road prompted, a drama where 27 miners are trapped underground and the leadership conundrum. I am Nuala.
And I am Karen. And we are the Safety Collaborators. Consider us your thinking partners, sharing expertise and wisdom in all aspects of safety culture, physical, emotional, and psychological well-being.
Our mission is to help people have better conversations and change the way they think about safety.
So this week we continue with the 5 questions that we started last week, and as we said at the beginning of last week's episode, that we would never get through the 5 questions in one episode, so here we are.
Who were we kidding?
Yeah, no, there was no way. So we're talking about the leadership conundrum, and we really feel that that's a big deal. There's a lot of pressure put on leadership, I feel. And it's, how do you balance safety, productivity, being profitable, and all of those elements? And that's what we've been talking about up to this point. So last week's episode, which was 45, you can go back and have a listen to the first 2 of those 5 questions. Let's just give you a little bit of a recap of those. So question 1 was, how do leadership actions and decisions affect safety culture in high-risk industries? Question 2 was about balancing profitability and safety, and how can leaders communicate a commitment to safety without compromising profits, because they are equally important. Then we did also touch on question 3, which was, what challenges arise when leadership messages are misinterpreted by the workforce, particularly concerning safety? And we're going to continue from question 3. Question 4, we're going to dive a bit more into leadership accountability, and question 5, the art of pondering. So let's continue the journey.
Let's continue the journey looking at that communication, because I'm still convinced that if it was a 4-letter word, it would probably be the most used swear word in the entire world, because we all talk about it, but nobody really gets it right.
That's so true. So true. Yeah.
And so often we will put out a message and we believe that we are clear and that everyone's going to understand it in every level of the organization. And we're so super proud of this, or, we know that the message is going to go out, it's going to be followed through. And yet, by the time it gets down to the person who's actually on the shop floor or on the rig floor doing the actual job, there's been a little bit of a mismatch between what people potentially in head office are thinking and what's happening on the ground, or what was agreed in the morning production meeting to what is actually happening out there on the ground. And I think it is a huge challenge for leaders. How do we communicate in a way that is clear, understood, and that if there is any potential for misinterpretation, that the feedback loop comes back, that it's not just a one-way direction. We did cover these, actually, when we were doing a little bit of research before we came back into this and refreshers, and June was our month of communication for exploring that. So we've got some fantastic episodes from episode 29 to 32 that if you want to know more about personality diversity, listening, improving your communication style, how do you approach others, especially when you have to have difficult conversations, dive into those on safetycollaborations.com. You'll find it all there. But let's go back into, how do we match the message to the audiences? Because we may need to be thinking further of, are we just putting out one message, or do we need to be putting out multiple messages that are aligned to where different levels of the organization are?
Kind of pondering as you're speaking.
Yes. So do we have the same message for our executive team as we do for our workforce?
And I think the short answer to that is no. It's about aligning the message to, how do I put this? Like, the message has to resonate to the person that we're giving it to. I mean, what we say is only as good as the interpretation of the person in front of us. We might speak all the speak in the world and think we're using the right words and the right interpretation or the right meaning, the right intention. But if the person in front of us, or the person that is intended to understand what we're saying, doesn't get it, then it doesn't matter how many words we use or how clever we sound or that type of thing. So it's how do we position the same message? And I think this is kind of what you were saying just a minute ago. How do we position the same message to the different audiences? And I think that's possibly one of the biggest challenges.
And difficult to do because it takes time.
That's the other thing.
Yeah, it actually just triggered when I was doing a sales course a few years ago, and it was all around stakeholder messaging.
That's it.
What are your stakeholders and what is important to them?
Yeah.
So your executives want to know, well, how is this going to improve the organization and the bottom line in 3 to 5 years? Management need to know, well, how is this going to improve my team and my business in the next 6 to 18 months? The workforce need to know, how is this going to help me today?
Absolutely. Bang on.
Yeah, who knew? The reality is that we are all salespeople in everything we do, whether it's selling the message or selling the business.
Wow. I mean, I think when we talk about safety, it's a sales and marketing activity as much as it is anything else. Who knew that sales would be such an important thing? Well, it is, as you say.
So there are a couple of things to take into consideration. So let's have a look at when we're communicating. If we don't want to mess up the message, who are our stakeholders? What's important to them? What time frame, what action, what is important to them? Then we need to think about, well, what is the wording or the way in which we're putting across? So are we being culturally sensitive? Are we using language that helps deliver the message? And I've had such a reality check of that a few times over the last couple of years working in a diverse language group because I love to write. And I often use apparently quite highfalutin English. And I'll send in my weekly reports and, do all these summaries. And someone from another language group will come to me and go, I've had to go onto Google and I've learned a whole lot of new words this week, which is interesting. But I didn't really anticipate having to learn new words. Could you just make it simple next week? And I'm grateful for the feedback.
It's a valuable lesson for everybody because it happens across the board. You take the word safety. In some languages, that word doesn't exist.
It comes across as hazard.
Or security.
Oh, yes.
So security is safety and security at the same time. There isn't actually a word for safety. I think that's true in French. Sécurité, there's seguridade in Portuguese. They don't really have that word safety. So that word, even just that, can be tricky for people if they're hearing it for the first time. Or for us if we're trying to write something about safety and not security, because for us there are 2 words for these 2 things and they have 2 different meanings.
It brings us back to double clicking.
Yes, it does.
Can I double click on that so that I can get a bit more information about what you are talking about? Give me detail. Let's dig into the layers.
Which I guess comes down to, if you're not sure, ask.
So as a leader, how do you create that space within your team for open and transparent communication flow in both directions?
Exactly.
And I think if you're struggling with that, or if you're realizing that your message may not be being interpreted, it's time for a deeper conversation and really exploring, maybe is it the way that cultural norms are, or is it unwritten rules that make these things like not be working as well as you would like them to be? And it's a really, really fantastic skill as a leader to be able to put your hand up and go, I think I need a little bit of help here.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here for. So that's the first dance with the leadership conundrum today.
The second one is about accountability. And interestingly enough, I've been having a conversation this morning with one of our clients as we're redesigning a safety leadership program that we've been running now for 3 years, but we're changing it up a bit. And one of the areas is, how do we make people, and they're all leaders, how do we make them more accountable even for the work that they've got to do on this program? Yep. Because us facilitators can't make them do anything, really. We can inspire, we can encourage, we can give ideas, nudge, we can do all sorts of things. But, we can lead the horse to water, but we cannot actually make it drink.
Whether that's you as a facilitator, whether it's as a coach on site.
Exactly. Same thing.
Where does the accountability come in?
Our job is to build rapport, is to make people think and to plant seeds and to do a variety of things that we do to help. But at the end of the day, people need to be accountable. And it's been fascinating over the past 3 years how myself and my co-facilitator, which in this case isn't my friend Nuala here on the call, it's actually Andrew, which you may have listened to on another podcast. We sit there and sometimes we get to the end of the day and we go, why can't they be accountable for them? Why our own actions? Well, we've actually decided we're going to push a little harder this time around. In what we tried to do there is how do we help people share stories? How do we help them to consider their actions and also take ownership of that? So in the case of this leadership program, what we're actually going to do is make it very, very clear up front that taking action during this program is non-negotiable. They must do it. Now, that doesn't mean someone's going to do something just because we sit there and say it's non-negotiable. They go, yeah, so what, I'm busy. So what we've done now, quite typically in programs, you will get the senior managers to come on early and say, look, we're really supporting this program and we think it's great that you're doing this and taking the time out of your busy schedules to, help change the culture of the organisation and blah, blah, blah. This time round, we're not going to invite them in up front, but we're going to actually invite them in at the end. And we're going to say to these leaders, right from this day one, you're going to work on a project during this 2-month program. And at the end of the program, on the 3rd live workshop that we run, you're going to actually be presenting to your management. Now, this is a global program, so it'll be different leaders in different regions, that's fine, whoever the senior people are, so that we can help create that space for accountability.
As you're saying that, it's also bringing back in that feeling that their contribution is going to be seen and make a difference.
Exactly. So I think it's about feedback loops. It's about being heard. We've probably all been on courses and things. We get all excited and we go back to our workplace and we sit there and say, oh, here's a really good idea I want to implement. But the boss, let's call him the boss at this point, sits there and goes, yes, well, that's good. Let's talk about that next week. Right now we've got this to do because you've been away for a couple of days, blah, blah, blah. And of course, next week never comes. So this way, I think it's about helping to also hold the leadership accountable, actually, for this program and the people that they are putting onto the program.
Because there's purpose. They're not putting them on there to have a warm and fuzzy and tick a box and go, oh, yay, we all clapped hands. There's a purpose to actually improving the organisation, improving the teams, having a better environment, a safer environment, which, as we say, becomes a more cost-effective environment. So I think that sounds like a fabulous levelling up.
That's a nice word. So it means that you now have got people who are going to have to take some personal responsibility, not waste time. And I think that's important too, even for ourselves. We don't want to feel like we're attending something just because we do then feel like it's a waste of time. But if they feel that there is a purpose at the end of it and somebody's going to be listening to their short presentation, then okay, I need to do something. I think also through this process, we're going to be with them all the way, of course. They'll have some coaching through this, so we'll help them. So if they think that they're not making sense or whatever, we can help them through that. And I think through that, they're also building trust. Now, I know we've got some words on our notes here, actually, about learning from mistakes and rebuilding trust, which is also part of leaders taking accountability and I think showing vulnerability as well.
Very much.
So accountability seems to be a bit of a challenge across many organisations and across the many layers of an organisation. So I do think it plays very well into the leadership conundrum, thinking about how can you as a leader create scenarios where it encourages not others, but even each other to be more accountable and responsible for what's going on. And so we're responsible for profit and safety and making sure things get done in a timely manner.
You mentioned the coaching aspect on this program. And as a coach, whether that is group coaching, one-on-one coaching, on-site safety coaching, it's not, as we said, our responsibility to push people to be accountable. But where that becomes incredibly valuable is being able to create a safe space for leaders to reflect on themselves, because accountability starts with the person in the mirror.
Definitely.
And sometimes it's having a hard conversation with that person in the mirror in a safe space for somebody else to hear you out.
Yeah.
because it can be really tough trying to have that conversation with somebody in your team or with your superior, so your manager or your supervisor, and say, well, you know what, actually I'm just finding it really difficult to get up, and that's why I'm late every day, whatever the case is. Or I'm just battling to be inspired about implementing this new process with the team or this new program or whatever it is. Who do you as a leader go to that you can vent, that you can be inspired, that you can reflect on what you're doing that's really good and build on from that? Because that's where accountability starts growing rather than diminishing.
Couldn't agree more. And I've actually been, I'm going to use the word pondering here, pondering a little bit about that even to myself. You know, when we don't meet our own goals or we don't achieve what we want to achieve, the only person we're letting down is ourselves. And it's because we haven't held ourselves accountable. So, as you say, look in the mirror. What do you need to do? And that will inspire others to be accountable.
If this podcast is adding value to you and your colleagues, check out our past episodes. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform and never miss a thing. Now, back to the conversation.
Pondering.
Pondering, as you keep mentioning, is something that is an incredibly valuable way of considering where you're at, considering what the implications might be of the decisions you want to make, the unintended consequences, positive and negative. And it is a great self-coaching tool. That leads us to 5, which is the art of pondering. How do leaders incorporate this into their decision-making process, and how will it benefit leaders?
What would be an example? How could we make this visual?
So one of the ways is to think about, well, when you are going to make a decision or you know something's coming up, and actually for some people, what's even better is just book an hour in your calendar once a week and call it your ponder moment or your time to think. And you can either do it quite structured, so, you know, have some questions like, what is a critical decision that I need to make that will impact the organization and my team and potentially the safety or a financial implication for the business? What are the expectations and the purpose? What do I want to achieve? What's the outcome that we want to see from this decision? So what's going to be different? What's going to be better? What might people be thinking? What might people be doing differently? What would I hear when I'm out on the rig floor or out on the construction site to know that this decision's been done? What are the things that could go wrong? You know, that question of, well, what could possibly go wrong? And don't go, oh no, man, I came up with this idea. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Because guess what? We love to look through rose-tinted glasses, especially when it is something that we want to implement. So take those rose-tinted glasses off, put them on the table, and really question, what could this idea, when it's implemented, cause to have an incident, to create a loss for anything? What are the dark sides to this? And then how will we know if we're getting it right? So what are the signs we'll be seeing? And then weigh it up. And sometimes it's quite nice to actually have like a pros and a cons list. So as you're going through these questions and these ideas in your ponder moment, go, well, these are all the pros. These are all the positives around this idea, the solution that we want to implement. And here are all the cons. If your cons list starts outweighing your pros, you've got a problem.
For sure.
Call for help. Yeah. So that's one of the ideas. What do you think? What's another way to use it?
I was just thinking about those people that might struggle with this concept. So when we say pondering, we don't mean just sitting back and, looking for daisies and flowers and roses. What we really mean is give your brain and your nervous system the time to think. Now, for some people, pondering might be doodling. So while you're thinking about something really important or you've got to work your way through some critical thinking process, you might be doodling at the same time because that helps the brain to settle. It's a distraction from what else you might think you need to be doing.
Process.
Another thing might be using a timer. You'll turn on the timer. So these are sort of more physical tips, if you like. I know it works for me. If I need to really focus on something or spend some time thinking about something, I literally turn the timer on my watch, on my phone. And it could be for an hour, it could be for whatever. And it has this weird effect where it just, okay, my brain says, right, for the next hour, I think about nothing else till I hear a noise. And it's amazing how quick that hour goes and what you can get done. These are more how to apply the principles, I guess, of just sitting and allowing the brain. Because there was another podcast I was listening to, we have lost the art of being bored.
And that is where the best ideas come from.
That's when you get your best ideas, in the shower, when you're pondering life.
Funny enough, I was going to say one of my best places is actually in a bath.
Mine's in the car driving. It's a challenge because it's really difficult to put things. But these days with voice notes, it's not so bad. I'm getting better at the voice note thing. But yeah. So these are some ideas on what pondering is, how can it help you in the leadership and the decision-making process. And it might also be aligning it to, well, what are your values? What are you trying to achieve? Values-driven decision-making is quite positive, and tends to be more aligned to business outcomes as well.
And when you actually get into the practice of this, you will find that you will be having a better quality of decision-making, that the unintended consequences will be reduced, whether that is something catastrophic as an accident or incident, or a relationship being broken, or just a minor financial loss. And that you will start to have a more thoughtful leadership approach to the way that you lead your team within the organization. And that goes up and down.
Yes.
So how do you lead the people that report into you? And how do you lead up into the people that you report into? So that two-way communication flow starts becoming far more effective, which means that we're having better actions, which means our profitability and our safety is improving, and that we're having to face less challenges along the way. Oh my gosh, we have just solved all the problems in the universe.
If only.
If only.
I was trying to think, how do we sort of go full circle to our Ice Road story with this? So what was it that triggered these 5 questions from that Ice Road movie, which I'm actually really looking forward to seeing, because it's not actually available to me yet, interestingly.
Dig into that. When I was watching that and when it was kind of coming to the end, and one of the biggest things that stood out for me was the horror from the supposed head office management team as to how destructive the on-site leadership had become in order to get what they felt was their deserved incentives. So worst case scenario is when you are not really considering how your organization communication flows, how the decisions impact, what we mentioned last week around making a decision today that ends up causing a fatality in 6, 12, 24 months but we saved so much money in the process, is we don't have crystal balls. That we don't. We do not get to see into the future. But what we do get to do is take a deeper dive and consider in the moment that if we slow down and we really are considered, we're measured, we get feedback from the different correct stakeholders, we match our message to the different areas, and we put that devil's advocate hat on. Ask the questions, the hard questions and those controversial questions, because you don't want to be the person going, but all I was doing was trying to incentivize them. I never meant to kill anybody. So that was where it really stood out for me, is that you don't ever want to be that person having to make that phone call or being the leader to give the bad news. And I've been there.
So I
was a very, very young manager when I had to make that call and tell a loved one that somebody had passed away very, very tragically. It's not a nice place to be.
No, it's not.
And that's part of the reason why I've ended up doing the work that I do, because I don't want people to make those phone calls or have to experience those.
Or experience an investigation.
That's a horrible, horrible, negative stain on life is the only way I can describe it.
And it's hard to recover from. And that's what we don't want.
Yeah.
Which is the purpose of what we do and why we share our thoughts, our ideas, so that we hopefully inspire others to think a little differently, no matter where or what your role is. For us, leadership is not about a title.
Not at all.
It's about how do you lead yourself and those around you.
So there may be some young leaders who, or not so young leaders, anyone who's listening to this and going, I want to learn more. And that's where we're here to help. So reach out to us at hello@safetycollaborations.com so that you can share your inspiring stories, because we don't want to end this on negative stories.
No.
No. Share your inspiring stories with us and help others
Take a
learn.
moment to ponder your leadership style and how it influences those around you. What do you need to consider or learn about yourself to be a more effective leader?
Because now it's your turn to make a difference.
So thank you for joining us today. Always lovely to have that conversation that matters. Connect with us on our website, safetycollaborations.com. Feel free to leave us a message on our website or on our LinkedIn pages. We're easy to find on LinkedIn because both Nuala Gage and Karen Avari are only one of each. That's it. And of course, if you enjoyed this podcast, please help us spread the word by following us on your favourite podcast platform and or just share the link with others. That would be really, really appreciated. So till next week, stay safe and stay well.